So first up, we have Dr. Stephen Galson. He is the Senior Vice President of Global Regulatory Affairs and Safety at Amgen. Prior to Amgen, Dr. Galson was Senior Vice President for Civilian Health Operations and Chief Health Scientist at Science Applications International Corporation. He spent more than 20 years in government service, including 2 years as Acting Surgeon General of the United States, and previously he served as Director of the FDA Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, where he provided leadership for the center's broad national and international programs in pharmaceutical regulation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Galson.
Thank you. I'm going to stand up here so I can see the slides. And I'm honored to be here. This has been a really invigorating day. I was convinced based on the last session that I made the right decision going to medical school instead of law school. Patent law is pretty hard, let me tell you. That was I was very impressed with those speakers, and I hope to learn more from you as we go on. So some of the slides that I prepared, the material has sort of been presented by other speakers. We didn't really know how this was going to fall out, so I'll go quickly through that. You've already heard about the very high price to develop each product that comes out of the finish line in drug development, and there are a lot of criticisms of these numbers. Yes, this number includes failures. There are other ways to calculate it, but no matter what, it's beyond a doubt clear that it's very, very expensive and risky to develop drugs. Only about 10% of the drugs that start get out at the other side. You've heard that from multiple speakers already. That's a lot of programs that fall by the wayside. And we've heard about the need for transparency, about the process of failure and how things fail, and I think that's a very worthwhile discussion. And of course, a lot of these failures occur early, but there's a significant number of the failures that don't occur until the very end, where the development costs are the highest. And that, I think, for a developer, for part of a development team at Amgen, that is perhaps the scariest part of things. So the cost to develop a drug has also increased. Now, we could talk for 10, 15 minutes about all the ways that we've worked to be more efficient in drug development, and there are certain things that have become more efficient, but other things have become less efficient or more costly, so that the overall cost continues to go up, and that's something that it's very difficult to control and that we're working on across the industry, but obviously there's a lot more that could be done. I was talking at lunch with Senator Bingaman about why we're not doing more platform trials. That's a very, very good point. There are mechanisms like that that could possibly decrease the cost of drug development with more collaboration across different players. So this is just an example of the complexity. These are the types of molecules that one company, Amgen, is developing. And I think we haven't talked about manufacturing a lot. Chris Austin talked about it. But the complexity of manufacturing biological molecules in a large quantity that's necessary to distribute a drug globally is really difficult for people that aren't involved with it to understand. In many cases, living cells have to be trained to manufacture the types of molecules that you see on this slide, or like the one in blue on the bottom row. It's the bottom row. The drug is actually a virus that's genetically modified to attack melanoma cells and stimulate the immune system. So the complexity of both testing these for effectiveness way after the basic discoveries may have been made, and then manufacturing them really can't be underestimated. This is depressing. This is the success rates over time, and you can see in early phases the success rates have not increased barely at all, if any. The success rate in phase 3 is increased a little bit over a long period of time. So the fact is that we need a lot more investment in how to develop drugs better if we're going to make appreciable impacts in these success rates. The success rates do vary across therapeutic areas, and also, sadly or challengingly, some of the areas where we have the largest public health needs, cardiovascular, neurological types of drugs, Alzheimer's, heart disease, big problems in public health, they are the areas where the failure rates are the highest. So these are scientific challenges that need addressing both at the basic science level and in the development side that you've heard about today. But I don't want to be completely depressing. We have made marked improvements in health in some areas, and we've heard a lot already about new developments in cancer, and they have made an impact in increasing survival rates in certain types of cancer over the last decade. So we are making progress, but in science and in human health, progress is slow, and we're constantly being surprised, as you know. This is just an example of that type of surprise. Amgen and Novartis announced just a couple weeks ago that we were stopping development of one of the largest Alzheimer trials, and of course this comes on the heels of multiple failures in phase 3 development programs across the Alzheimer's field, almost pushing us back to the starting line again in the way that we're thinking about developing therapies for Alzheimer's disease. The investments in these products, not just Amgen and Novartis's, but other companies, is in the billions of dollars that have had to be stopped because of failures of the clinical trials. There are multiple ways to look at investment return, and many of you may be more expert on this than I am. I have two slides, one that looks at the return on investment in dollars, looking at the return coming out the other end for the number of dollars going in. That has been going down. No question the industry is still profitable, but the profitability has been decreasing over time. When we're talking about drug pricing, you have to keep that in mind. And then you've seen this slide already today. This is the number of new products that are coming out per the dollar going in. And it's just amazing that continues to go down. As Dr. Woodcock mentioned this morning in the data, since 2010 that isn't on there, it may be creeping back up again, which would be great. So this is one of the slides that surprises my colleagues and friends who work in the government who don't know the numbers that well, which is that the investment in human health or biological R&D in the private sector dwarfs the public sector involvement. So we talked a lot about NIH today. Keep in mind that private companies and private capital provide about twice the amount of money as NIH. And that's just important to think about when you're thinking about controls or new ways to control costs. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be paying attention to it. Chris and his colleagues at NCATS and folks at FDA and people across the drug development spectrum in companies are looking at many of these advances that are on the right side of this slide. Better computational power, better genetics. I won't read them all, but there are very, very exciting developments in the area of drug development, both in biomarkers, in the way that we're collaborating, public-private partnerships, different types of trials and analysis that you've heard about today. So I am very optimistic about the future, but we do have a long way to go. So in conclusion, I'm actually keeping on time here, the cost and the complexity of drug development continue to increase. Unfortunately, the productivity measured by both the dollars out compared to the dollars in and the number of drugs coming out at the end of the pipeline continue to decline. The private industry spends about twice as much on NIH as R&D. There are lots of good examples. You're going to hear about some later in this session today, activities where FDA is collaborating closely with academia, with NIH, with the Defense Department, and nonprofit groups, and you're going to hear about some of that today in this session as well. New technologies, process improvements, genetic validation, advancements in information science, and many, many others make the progress look like it's actually taking place across industry, and productivity may be turning around. We'll just have to see. So let me stop there, right on time, and pass it on to the next speaker. Thanks.